This podcast tells the stories of people who have immigrated to the United States and of people whose families have immigrated to the United States. This podcast gives people the platform to let their voices be heard and to tell their stories about their experiences in the United States. The views and opinions expressed in this interview are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of UNL programs, faculty, and students.
You can just start by introducing yourself.
So my name is Lan. I was born and raised in Sioux City. I graduated from North High in 2011. And then I went to Iowa. I actually graduated early there. I graduated in 2014. And then I decided to move back home to Sioux City. I went to WIT and studied in the PTA program there. So it's physical therapy assistant. That was a 2-year program. From then I just started working. So my family, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, so it's a bunch of us. I would say we're all pretty well educated. My parents are both from Vietnam. I talked to my dad about when he moved to the U.S. He moved to the U.S. in 1980. So he was considered a refugee. So he escaped from Vietnam. So he told me like the story about what he had to do to come to the U.S. So him and my uncle, I think it's not his oldest brother, but the one closest to him. They both were like running in like Cambodia. They were actually gunned down by child soldiers. So they were like in refugees camps for a while, and then they finally made it to the U.S. But my dad had 2 older brothers in the U.S. already, and they were in the U.S. to go to college. So from there, I think my uncle has helped him kind of like situate in the U.S. and all of that. My mom, hers was a little different. So she actually, I think my grandpa came to the U.S. first, and then my mom came in 1987. So he was able to bring my grandma and my mom and her siblings over just like by, I think it's called a visa, or maybe like just like I don't know how to say it. Almost like a green card, I want to say. So that was like her situation. So it was a lot different from my dad. I mean, like he had like a way more scary situation than my mom did. But I remember growing up, my mom would tell me like there were times where she would be just at home with like my grandma, and then all of a sudden my grandma would tell her to go under the bed because they will start hearing bombs outside their house. This was during the time of the Vietnam War, so a lot different from us growing up. Yeah. But from then, I mean, so my dad, when he moved to the U.S., he was in the West Coast for a while. He lived in San Francisco, worked there for a while, and then decided to move to Sioux City for just like more job opportunities. My mom moved straight to Sioux City, and my parents met in Sioux City. I mean, growing up, I felt like we had a pretty good childhood. My mom worked at John Morrell before they closed, so she was there for a while. My dad was at Interbake for a while, then he decided to leave. So I mean, like my parents both had production factory jobs, but I think overall they provided a great childhood for me and my siblings.
Did your dad move to the U.S. just because he had family here and like that was the easiest place to escape to? Or was there like a specific reason other than that?
I think more for like a better life. I mean, he had, I think it was just like one other sibling in Vietnam, but his mom, my grandma, already moved to the U.S., so she was in San Francisco too. So yeah, so I think he decided just to move for like a better life, be closer to more family as well. So I do have a couple aunts in Vietnam still.
Would you say like growing up in the U.S. and having immigrant parents, have you really noticed there being a difference from like maybe friends that didn't have immigrant parents?
I would say at times. I mean, my mom was pretty strict on like me and my older sister growing up. I mean, she would let us hang out with friends, but I mean, it would just be for like a short period of time. Like we would have to be home at a certain time. It was like she was on like always calling us to come home, but more worried about us. But what was it like? Even the difference from like me and my boyfriend. I mean, he's an only child, and I just feel like he had like more freedom in a way. I felt like I always had to help take care of my younger siblings too. And then like, yeah, and then like, so my mom worked like, she had her full-time job, but then like her side job was cooking. So there'd be like weekends where we'll be helping her like make egg rolls or helping her prep her food for like prep veggies and all that. So we would do that rather than like hanging out with friends or doing sports or anything like that. So growing up, I was never involved in sports. It was more like academics, and then maybe like other like just small clubs like multicultural club, or another one I was in was Friends of Rachel. You know, like Rachel was the girl who was killed in the Columbine shooting. Yeah, so like that group was like about her and like how she was her acts of kindness.
So would you say that they probably put a lot of pressure on academics? Like, did they convince you to like, or put pressure on you to go to college for like getting better education and stuff?
I would say yes. I mean, with my family, most of my siblings were like top 10% of the class. And then like my older sister and my younger brother, they're valedictorians in their class. So I would say they really push academics on us a lot. I just felt like sometimes I felt myself, I felt like I was drowning because I wanted to like, I don't know, be more involved with my friends and all of that more than academics. But a lot of my other siblings, they took more, I don't know how to say it, but they wanted to focus more on their studies and academics in a way than I did.
Did you grow up speaking more than one language then because of your parents?
So I grew up speaking Vietnamese, and then they would teach me a couple like English words, but mostly when I went to elementary school, I had to go into ESL. I think until I think it was third grade when I graduated from ESL. Growing up, like I would say like I would pronounce some words differently, and then I finally realized like I was like, oh, I was saying it wrong the whole time.
Was that a pretty good experience then? Did you say like ESL was like helpful and like it worked well?
Yeah, I would say so. I honestly felt like I needed it in a way. I would say, like growing up, I used I used Vietnamese like maybe 80, 75 to 80% of the time, and then once I learned English, I started using English more with my parents, and then um, and then with my younger siblings, like the two youngest ones, they know like some Vietnamese, but not as much as us older ones do. Because I mean, growing up, they just heard like me and my older sister and my younger brother just speaking English instead of Vietnamese to one another.
Did your parents know a bit of English then before they moved here, or did they like have to completely learn it once they got here?
Yeah, I think they knew some, but of course they had to learn it when they got here. I remember like at times they're like I would help my mom take my grandma to her doctor's appointment, and it'll be me interpreting like like a 10-year-old interpreting for my grandma. Like even in high school, I would help my grandma out with a lot of things. Like I would drive her to her doctor's appointment. and then like interpret there, and then take her to like get her prescription medications. Like with my mom, I would take her to like help like apply for her jobs like after John Morrell closed. Yeah, so I would be like the ones interpreting for my mom mostly, but I think my dad understood more English more than my mom did. He also took advantage of technology too. Like he's like the one like playing on the computer or like on his iPhone a lot more. My mom doesn't want to do anything with like all of that. Like my mom has a smartphone, but she keeps it at home, so it's like it's hard to reach her at times.
Have you gone to Vietnam at all, or like have your parents gone back since they've moved here?
My dad hasn't. My mom went back once, but that was only to help my grandma come back to the U.S.
Thank you for letting me interview you. So like this podcast will be shared on like the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Honors College page.
Yeah.